My name is Tom DeLong. This is my assistant, Mr. Sean Waxman. And today we're going to talk about the sport of powerlifting. It's a strength sport consisting of the squat, bench, and the deadlift. In competition, we take the best of each lift, combine them all together, and whoever has the biggest total wins. But let's look at the term power. Power is actually a lot of strength done really fast. But if we look at the sport itself, each lift is actually a max lift done very slowly. So we're going to talk about that today because maximum strength is so important in every sport because you need maximum strength to be able to do power itself. So we're going to start today by looking at the squat first and look at the key points of performance. So let's get moving. Let's go through the basics of what a squat looks like in powerlifting. The object is, when they first do a squat, they've got to squat down where the top of the hip is below the top of the knee to make it a legal squat in powerlifting. So right now, let's just demonstrate what a full squat is supposed to look like. So Sean, go ahead. Let's go ahead and squat down. Now if we look at this, the top of the hip is supposed to be below the top of the knee. All right, come on back up. Now, if we look at a powerlifting squat too, there are many, many different types of squats. There are multiple variations of squat. This is what they call a low bar squat, and he's got a wide stance. And in this case, it's pretty much a medium stance. There are high bar squats where the bar sits up here. This is a high bar squat with a medium stance. There are close stance squats where the feet are close together. And a high bar squat, let's do that one too. I just want you to see the multiple variations of the different types of squats. All right, that's a high bar squat where the trunk is a lot more vertical. Well, let's go back to the powerlifting squat where the bar's down a little bit. Okay, his feet are wider. Let's do it again. If we look at that, let's look at this. Look at the angle of the trunk. His trunk is more horizontal. He's bent over more. The shins are much more vertical itself. And if we drew a line straight down, they're more through the middle of the feet. He's sitting back more. This angle here is a lot different too. So he's going to be using a lot more hamstrings, glutes, low back. So he's going to be using many more muscle groups to lift a lot more weight. Okay, come back up. Now let's do the high bar squat again. Bar's going to be sitting on top of his shoulders, his trapezius. Now watch. The elbows will come under there. And if we look here, the bar's coming straight down through the middle between his knee and his hip, through the middle of the foot, and he's going to be using a lot more quads. His trunk is much more upright, so the load's going through more of his spine, and his stress isn't on his low back as much. So go ahead and stand up. So there's a big difference in the type of squats we do. For powerlifters, they're trying to sit back a lot more to use more of what they call the backside or posterior chain because they can lift more weights that way. That's what they're trying to do. So they're trying to get, the biggest thing is they're trying to get the top of that hip below the top of that knee. All right, go ahead and face the camera, Sean. Awesome, so let's go ahead and squat down. Now you'll see too, let's go powerlifting squat. Now the key is too, here's how he's going to set up as well too. When he does a powerlifting squat, the bar is going to be down below. We can just see the top of the bar right below the top of his shoulders. His hand spacing is going to be however he wants it, however he feels comfortable. The bigger guys want, they have a tendency to go out a little bit wider because of the mass of the shoulders. Now, you're going to get a lot of different variations on how to grip. Some people like to grip, they grab the bar this way. A lot of people have it where they have a thumbless grip and they pull down on it. They have it with no grip at all, like this way, and they pull down on the bar and they keep a straight wrist and all that with the elbows flaring out this way. It just depends on the person and that type of variation. So it's all individual. I like it with the grip in the bar and you can pull down on the bar. If you look at Louis Simmons, the powerlifting guru in this country, he likes his lifters to grip the bar, pull down, try to bend the bar around their neck to pull down on it. All right? Also, too, when you're setting up for this, you stand up straight, you squeeze the glutes and try to screw your feet into the ground and push out to the sides of your feet. Because what that does, it activates the abductors and activates the glutes as well too. You push out to the sides of the feet. Now when he squats down, now watch this. When he sits down, he's going to bend first here. He's going to stick his butt back because he wants to try to sit back. So go ahead and do it again. He's going to push out to the sides of his feet. He's going to keep his knees lined up over his feet. All right, so go ahead and stay down there. Now, see that? His knees are lined up here. He's sitting back. The top of the hip is below the top of the knee. He's activating all his hamstrings, his glutes, his low back, and everything too. But that trunk is leaning over, and he's using all that posterior chain or his backside. So come on up. Also too, when he's coming up, his hips and shoulders are rising at the same time. He's not straightening out his legs first. He's coming up this way. So he's going to activate all these muscles in sync. That's what he's supposed to do. So therefore, they're all working at the same time. It's called a concurrent shift where the quads, the hamstrings, and his trunk muscles are all working together. That's what he's supposed to do. All right? Now, how do we get set up first before he goes down? Once he gets set up out of that rack, first thing he's going to do is take a big breath and squeeze down. That's called tightening of the abs. He's supposed to do that. He's activating all those ab muscles to tighten down on the spine. He wants to make sure his spine is protected. Once he does that, then he descends first. Go ahead. Push out on the sides of the feet. Come down, come down, come down, and come back up. All right, go ahead and take a break. Now, a lot of people do, what do you do with the head? If you look at most powerlifters, what do? They're looking at the judge. The judge is looking at them. Once they get set up, the judge goes squat. So what do? Most of the time, they're looking straight ahead. It all depends what that lifter wants to do most of all. Some people want to keep a neutral spine with the head looking as they squat down. They're keeping the head in the neutral position there, so they're looking down this way. Other people keep looking their head straight ahead. Now, a lot of people think too, if they're looking straight ahead, as you're coming down, if you keep your head looking straight ahead or up, it forces the hips forward. They're going to use more quads. It all depends what the individual wants to do and what the range of motion is around each joint as well. So that it all depends on the individual and what they want and the range of motion around each joint. So that's another thing you have to worry about for the individual as well too. Let's go ahead and turn to the side. Let's try it again. Let's take one more look at what we're doing here. Get set up, big breath, come down, sit back, comes down below parallel, come up again. Notice the hips and shoulders rise at the same time. Let's do one more. Big breath, come down, sit back, vertical, below parallel, come on up. There you go, very good. We just talked about basic motion patterns of the high bar squat and the low bar squat, about how to do each one properly, going down and coming back up. And now we're going to talk about why depth is so important in each one. Because we've been told in the general public that squatting below parallel is really bad for the knee. And it's really not, because in everyday real life, we squat below parallel all the time. So we're going to bring in this little toilet here because we squat below parallel every day. Every human being that uses this squats below parallel. And we use this as an example of using like a box squat. We use box squats in powerlifting to teach us how to come out of the bottom of a squat. And we're also going to talk about foot positions and how to use these properly, how to drive from our foot through the bar to get the proper position and the proper force production to get enough strength to lift that movement. So, okay, we're going to start with Sean in the powerlifting squat again. So the first thing he's going to do, he's going to get all set up. He's going to get proper abdominal tightening here. He's going to turn his feet out, push out to the side. He's going to screw his feet into the ground, big breath, and he's going to sit back on his heels and stick his butt back first and sit down on the toilet. So Sean, go ahead. Push his knees out, sit back, and he's going to sit down on it. Now watch what he's going to do. He's going to sit back on his heels, push his knees out, and he's going to drive up into the bar. And if you look at that, his hips and shoulders rise at the same time. Let's do it again. Sit back. Notice how his shins stay perpendicular right over top of his ankles. He's going to sit back on his heels, drive through his heels and his whole foot. And if you notice, as he comes up, his hips and shoulders rise at the same time, which means he's activating all these muscles back here, which is exactly what he's supposed to do. And if you notice too, when he sits down on this toilet, the average toilet is between 14 and 15 inches high. And guess what his thighs are doing? They're parallel to the ground, which is why we use this to teach a parallel squat. We just finished talking about how to drive through the feet in a powerlifting squat. Now we're going to go back to the high bar squat and look at same kind of concept about driving through the feet, but we also have to look at when the feet come in a little bit and the bar comes up on the top of the traps, how to adjust the arms. Because we looked at a powerlifting squat, the bar's down on the back and the hands go out a little bit and the elbows are coming back. But what happens when the bar comes up on the top of the traps, the feet come in? Where do the elbows go when the bar when you descend down with the bar? So let's start with that. Once again, everything's still the same. All right? Let's also look at this too. When the feet start here and you slowly move outward this way, look at where the feet and the knees go. When you move out this way, the knee and the feet always point in the same direction. So when you move your feet out, the knee and the foot always point in the same direction. So if you look, as Sean moves his foot out just a little bit, that knee and that foot are always pointing in the same direction. So when he's coming down, I keep telling him to keep the knee right over top of the ankle and the foot, because as you move out and the whole leg moves, that knee and foot move together. When you squat down, you do not want your feet pointing straight ahead, because that puts too much stress on the knee. When you move your feet out, the toes point out because the knee always points in the same direction. That's a big point of performance there. All right, so we get set up with a closer stance, high bar squat. It's working the quad. His trunk's going to be more upright. But when he descends down, everything's going to be the same. Screw the feet in, push out to the sides of the feet. He's going to pull his chest up, squeeze down on his abs. He's going to pull the bar down. First thing he's going to do is he squats down. Let's come down. He's going to pull his elbows underneath the bar as he comes down. Now look where he's at. The knee is right over top of the toe. He's pushing out to the sides. The knee does move forward a little bit over top of the toe. That's okay, because this is more of a quad dominant movement. The trunk is upright, the load's going through his spine, and if you drew a line straight down, it's through the middle of his foot. Push his knee out a little bit more. He's going to sit back on his heel a little bit. That's where it's supposed to be. He's sitting back on his heel. He wants to push through his whole foot. If he's on the ball of his foot, if this bar is too far forward and he's leaning there, if you drew a line straight down, it's over top of his foot. That means if the pressure's on the ball of his foot, all the stress is right here. He doesn't want that. If he sits back, pulls his chest up, all the stress is through the middle of his foot. That force is through the middle of his foot. That means his quads are working the most dramatically, which is where he wants that stress at. His quads, the load's through his spine, his core is working, his glutes are working, so are his hamstrings as well. That's a good squat. That's where you want that stress at. And when he comes out of the bottom, he drives through his whole foot, drives his chest up. The load's on his hamstrings, his quads, his hamstrings, and his glutes. His core's working isometrically. He drives up through the bar. And he repeats that every repetition. That's exactly the way it's supposed to be. We're going to give you some final thoughts on squat now. You have been told in the industry that you should only squat with your feet hip width or slightly right at shoulder width stance. Now there's no way you're going to have a universal squatting stance. If you look at the biomechanics books, if you look at a squat, it's a basic human motion. And if you apply that to any human motion, it's called a skill. Every skill has a technique, but if you apply that technique to a human, every human is built differently, so everybody has their own style of technique because it's based on the way they're built. Every human being is put together differently. People have short trunks, long legs, short legs. So based on how people are built, everybody's going to squat differently. So you start here with your feet between hip width and shoulder width and figure out from there, how do you squat? So I'm going to squat differently than Sean because we're two different human beings and we're built differently. Also too, based on range of motion at each joint, we're going to squat differently. The key is you got to squat below parallel and you're going to adjust your style of technique based on how you're built. That's our biggest key here. So Sean, let's start there. One of the things you can do is try to move your feet out to about shoulder width and try to squat down all the way. So do what we call a third world squat.
I'm okay here.
You're okay, just go ahead and try to squat down.
Yeah, where do you want my hand?
Just put them out in front of you and just squat all the way down. Now Sean can squat down where his top of his hips are below the top of his knee. All right? So he can squat down in this position. So if we can move our feet out just a little bit more, even with his feet narrow, Sean's got really good range of motion. And if we look at Sean, if his knees are over top of his feet, right there, he's got really good range of motion and he can sit upright. Sean's got a short trunk and long legs, but he's got really good range of motion. So for a normal squat, high bar stance, he can actually squat this way. So that would be his normal range of motion and that would be his normal squat stance. But even if he moves his feet in a little bit, he has really good range of motion. So he can adjust his style of squat to a couple different stances because also too, Sean is a former Olympic lifter, so he's got really good range of motion. But we can look at this and say he can squat a number of different ways, but he's got really good range of motion and he can squat a number of different ways. But with this, we know that he has a certain body type and we know he has an optimal squatting stance, and that's what you have to find. What is your optimal squatting stance? If you optimize your stance, you can maximize your efficiency and effectiveness of your movements and minimize the risk of injury. So go ahead and stand up. So that's one of our key points here. Everyone has to optimize their style of technique with this. You can start with what the general public says, what your squatting stance should be, and optimize it from there. So that's our segment on squats.